Hey folks, it's Mr. O'Keefe. This is part 3 of our Age of Discovery / Apocalypse notes. And like the other ones, we're going to start off with a warm-up question here. If you remember back to the second set of notes, I asked you if you would go on a voyage that took you to a different planet. We talked about the benefits and the risks there involved. So kind of picking up from there, we're pretending that you said yes, and you're going excuse me, and they went to this planet. Everything went well. You didn't die. You're on your way back, and you have all these alien plants and animals and foods and all kinds of exciting things to show everybody else. So what are some major effects that this would have on Earth? Well, a couple answers that I usually get here. Economic changes. There's a lot of more economic opportunities here for people. You could have a company that goes to this planet, and now that you went, it's maybe mapped. It's a little bit easier to get there. You know that the troubles that might be dangerous along the way that you could warn the ship about, or this new venture about. So that could be one idea. You could have people who maybe like chefs or restaurants that specialize in these alien cuisines. You could have an alien zoo open up. All kinds of ideas that could provide economic opportunity. Also, maybe on the negative side of things, disease. We don't really know necessarily what kind of diseases there are on this alien planet. Maybe that could spread on Earth from these aliens or from these, plants or animals that we would know how to deal with. Much like when the Europeans went to the Americas, we talked last notes about how the natives there didn't really have any immunity built up, where people from Africa or Asia would, with in regards to Europeans. So very similar thing could happen to Earth if this were to take place. So we'll kind of go back to this when we learn about the Columbian Exchange. So we're back on the Age of Discovery, like I said already. We have to remember, though, to look at these notes from two different lenses, from the lens of the Europeans and also the lens of the natives. And even a third lens we'll be looking at today is that of the Africans. We left off on the notes yesterday, or whenever you watch the other video of the notes, talking about the different European countries who really involved themselves in colonization. And we talked about the main ones. We talked about Britain, Spain, Portugal. We didn't talk about France. We didn't talk about the Netherlands. Also pretty heavily involved, but not to the degree as the three that we spoke about yesterday. Now, Spain and Portugal are both staunchly pro-Catholic monarchies. So the Pope, not wanting there to be a kind of civil war among Catholics, made this line of demarcation in the Treaty of Tordesillas that split the area that Spain and Portugal could control. And we said in the last notes that Brazil was the only land claim in the Americas by Portugal, and that's why Brazilians, by and large, speak Portuguese today, where most other people in South America speak Spanish, and that's directly from this treaty here. Now, also, if you think about the explorers, if you think about who made this route here, hopefully you know, that's Da Gama, who was Portuguese, who was the first to not come to the Americas, almost made that mistake, who was the first to begin European colonization to claim lands in the Americas for Spain. It was Columbus. All right, then we got Cortez, who defeated the Aztecs, you remember. Pizarro defeated the Inca. Magellan, who also sailed for the Spanish, found the Strait of Magellan, the passageway from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So that kind of makes sense why Spain would have claims to the Americas and Portugal would have claims to the spice trade and trade with the East Indies. So I always ask my classes, what's the problem with this? And they say, well, it's not fair for Portugal, but it was pretty fair. The spice trade is incredibly lucrative. So was having gold and silver. But as we saw yesterday with in the videos, Spain didn't really do a great job with the gold and silver that they acquired. But Portugal wasn't a powerful empire for years to come for a reason too. So that's not really it. The biggest problem is that this isn't the Pope's world to divide up. It's kind of like I remember my dad, he had to always share a room with one of his brothers. So they literally had a piece of tape going down the middle of the room. This is your side, this is my side. Don't touch my stuff. I won't touch your stuff. But you can't really do that with the world because there's more than 2 countries in the world. And they're basically saying that it shows a pretty huge lack of respect for other countries and other peoples. But the way to remember that is Tordesillas. Not trying to be funny, even when I am. People can't tell because I'm not funny. But basically, we're just trying to find a way to remember that. So it's split the Atlantic Ocean kind of in 2 here, where Spain gets one side, Portugal gets the other side. All right, on to the Columbia Exchange. Maybe the most important thing, if you get anything from these notes, hopefully it's this. Hopefully you get more than just this, but this is pretty important. So Columbian Exchange, we got Columbian, as in Christopher Columbus, and exchange. Things are going back and forth. So that is defined as the exchange of plants and animals between Europe and the Americas. Just like we said in the world, it's going to transform economic activity in both worlds. We'll get to kind of the specifics of capitalism, mercantilism, and at the end, but know that this was a cause. And why was it named that? Well, Columbus started that, right? He came to the Americas and he brought plants and animals and a little bit of gold back to Europe. And that's kind of what tipped off this whole, hey, let's go to the Americas thing with Europe. So that was started by Columbus. That's why it's called Columbus. Sorry. That's why it's called the Columbian Exchange. All right, so this is going to take us to our first video. I have a link in the description. It is another John Green video. It's going to be our last John Green video. You can watch as many as you want. But for these notes specifically, this is one of his better videos, I think. So take a look at that. Pause this, open that up in a new tab, and then once you're done, come back and I'll have some questions for you. All right, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. Here are my questions. First one, what are some goods that were brought from Europe to the Americas? Hopefully you can think of some. Well, the first one isn't a good. It's diseases. Thanks a lot. That's not very helpful, but it happened. Livestock, that's pretty helpful. You like bacon? You like hamburgers? I do. So that's all part of livestock. And he talks about how quickly pigs reproduce and all that fun kind of stuff. Sugar, also fantastic. Bees, no thank you. Not a big fan of bees in general. I understand they're important, but I don't like them. So that's that. What were some things that were brought from the Americas to Europe? Give you some time to think about that. All right, tomatoes. He said pizza a couple times on that video. When we think of like Italian food, it's a lot of times it's got some red sauce in it, right? Tomatoes. Well, Italian food wasn't the Italian food we know it today before the Columbian Exchange because they didn't have tomatoes to use. They did have breadsticks, so Olive Garden would still be in business, I guess, but no tomatoes. Potatoes, we think of that as an Irish staple. Not for really good reasons, actually, but that's a whole conversation for another day. People say, Mr. O'Keefe, you're Irish, you must like potatoes. Pretty sure my genes are sick of potatoes. Unless you got a lot of gravy, no. Turkey. Hopefully you're hoping for a story for each one of these, because here we go. So Turkey's a country. Turkey is an animal / food. So which came first? The answer is the country came first, because Turkish people would sell quail to Europeans. And when Europeans tasted a turkey, they said, hey, this tastes like quail, like what we get from the Turkish people, so they called it turkey. There you go. Hopefully remember that during Thanksgiving. Everyone will be very impressed with your knowledge. Corn, and then tobacco, which of course made you a lot of money and that didn't really turn out well for lots of folks, and it was kind of the return on investment for bringing diseases here to the Europeans. So some effects of it. We hit this in our warm-up a little bit. A more diversity of food. Of course, we get spread diseases. Cultural diffusion. Hopefully, you're like, oh yeah, I remember cultural diffusion. If not, it's okay. It's been weird lately. Cultural diffusion is just basically when a culture starts from one central point and spreads out. We talked about that happening with war and trade, and Columbian Exchange is definitely an example of trade, even though there is some war sprinkled in here and there. So who got the better end of this trade? Well, not the Native Americans, because a ridiculously high number of them died from this disease. Another effect that he talks about is actual decrease in the biodiversity of Earth. You get lots of invasive species which take over an area, and lots of different species of plants and animals die out, unfortunately. Not an intended consequence, but it happened. So here we have this nice visual. And when you look at some of these things, keep in mind why they're valuable. Some of these seem really random. Okay, grapes. I mean, I like grapes, but you make them to make wine. That's pretty important, especially for Catholics, because wine is used in Mass, made into, well, it's seen as the blood of Christ, and that's a whole different conversation for a different day, but know that they use that in Mass, so that's pretty important. Olives, used for olive oil, which is used in cooking all over the place. We talked about livestock and all these wonderful diseases. What's another effect? Population increase. More food, more availability of food means the price of food is going to go down, right? The demand for food is going to be the same, but the supply for it is going to increase, which makes the price decrease. Pretty simple economics. Remember, we talked about this before in my class. Why did the population increase? Okay, more food, but food doesn't make you live longer. It doesn't make you want to try to have children. But what it does do is it allows for children to live to adulthood. Really sad thing about history, high infant mortality rate, which means babies didn't really necessarily live very long. And a lot of that was due to poor nutrition on the mother's part, because she fed the baby ever since it was born. Also, a lot of mothers didn't make it through pregnancy. There was that factor too. But food's going to make people stronger, and the stronger you are, the more you can care for your babies in many ways, and the stronger that child will be, and eventually they can live to be an adult and produce their own children. And that's really why population is going to increase. It's not a right away thing. It's throughout generations, but it's going to increase a lot. This is a nice graphic of the different exploration routes, so we can review them real quick. This one, who was this? Columbus is right, I heard you. And then this person, this Portuguese man, Da Gama, very good. And what about this? Let's back to Unit 1. What was this trade route called? Silk Road, very good. And then another one I'm going to draw on here was Magellan. We talked about him. We saw his engraving with the naked angel guy flying next to him. Who could forget that? Probably Haunts Your Dreams. Anyways, he came through here, the Strait of Magellan, and his crew. Well, he came here to the Philippines, and then he didn't make it. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the Philippines. And that's when he died, but his crew kept on, and they went back to Spain, circumnavigating the globe. Another really important effect of exploration was the slave trade. You saw on the Columbian Exchange graphic that most of the goods on there really were crops. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, sugarcane, tobacco, cotton. A lot of those are cash crops. Basically, meant that you made a lot of money from planting those, from farming those. A lot of these were also labor intensive. Sugarcane, very labor intensive. Cotton, labor intensive. So instead of paying someone lots of money to do it, you could basically buy a person to have this done for you, which of course to us hopefully is morally reprehensible, but to them at the time, that's just how things were. And I'm not sure people thought about it all that much, unfortunately. So these people were taken from Western Africa, and we'll talk about why it was Africa in a second here, to plantations, basically big farms. Not too many slaves worked on small farms because small farmers couldn't really afford slaves usually, but sometimes it happened. But the real big wig type farmers, they were able to afford lots of slaves. And you see this picture here. It's basically a diagram, and maybe you can't tell, but these things are people here. At least we would call them people in 2020. And it's basically instructions on how you can fit as many people as you can on these ships. If you're like me and claustrophobic, no. If you're like any human, you can realize how horrific it would be to be in the situation. But from this graphic, it wasn't like in protest of it. It was just a very matter of fact, like, maybe this is page 6, page 7. All right, here's how you can fit as much corn as you can. Page 8, here's how you can fit all the potatoes that you can. It was very much seen as just another trade, which is, I think, tough for us to comprehend in this day and age. Next video is going to be a short documentary on the slave trade. I think it's really well done. So go ahead and pause this video, watch the movie in the description. I have a link there. Open that in a new tab, and then come on back after. I'll have some questions for you. All right, welcome back. So from the documentary, you should have seen what happened to the names of many enslaved people. And that was that they were taken away. And sometimes they were not given a name. Sometimes they were named just something like boy or man, or sometimes just property. I got other questions. Why did they do that? Why didn't they just put their names down? Wouldn't that have been easier? Well, the answer is they didn't want them to know who they were. They didn't want them to think that they were a person. Because having a name, I mean, it gives you an identity, right? And they didn't want the slaves to have an identity. They wanted slaves to be basically a piece of equipment. And there was a name of the passage where many enslaved people were, who basically didn't make it through this passage, and that was called the Middle Passage. And we'll see in a second why it's called the Middle Passage. Now, I told a story about a captain who had slaves on the ship who were getting sick and dying from a disease. And what did he do to maximize his profit there? And the answer is he threw them overboard. Not only would that be a horrible way to die, but there's the other side of that where people, regular people, threw these people, other people off the ship, and they knew that they were going to die that way. Sometimes kids, old people, babies. Why would someone do that? It's really hard to put ourselves in their shoes, I think. The reason that the captain did that, well, he's going to claim them on insurance, because just like any other cargo, you have insurance on that. And that's how insurance companies made money. That's how traders would not lose too much money. Now, it'd be one thing if you threw a bunch of bananas off the ship, but this is people. But they didn't see it like that. They saw it as, what's the difference between these people and bananas? And it's important that we know that, because there are, unfortunately, still people who really think that way. And I've already kind of answered this. How do they view the slave trade? But it's worth mentioning again, just like any other trade. What's the difference? They aren't seen as people. They're seen as a benefit or a commodity, not as people, because it was easier for them to do that, to think that way. But if they thought these are people, then it's going to be a lot harder for us to make money. So we just won't. So the way this was done is just like in every place in the world, you have people who are powerful, who have powerful civilizations, powerful empires, and they're going to be more powerful than other groups. In Africa, a little bit different because there was a demand for slaves by Europeans. So these people would go out and find weaker groups of people and basically enslave them and then sell them as slaves to Europeans. And there's stories about, well, a misconception I would always get as students say, well, white guys got these boats and just ran after them with like nets. That's kind of ridiculous. It wasn't really done like that. It was just, like I said before, it was like every other trade. Now we're kind of on a theme of racism here, and the Boers fit in pretty well with that. So Boers, and we'll hear about them again in a couple of units here, so I want to give you a background. They are, obviously you can tell from the picture, they're whites who came from the Netherlands, or they're Dutch, who settled South Africa and colonized South Africa. And that's really important. Think back to Da Gama's route. He went through the Cape of Good Hope, which is in South Africa. Super important trading area. So they basically started out there, expand their territory. Very brutal to the Native Africans, who lived there. And one way they justified that is that they were the chosen of God. Of course they were, right? That was kind of the danger with Calvinism. And really, any religion can be interpreted any way. Like I've said before, religion can be a tool for doing great things, and it can also be a tool, unfortunately, for doing some pretty nasty things, and that's what's happening here. Another example of that. So Boers will spring up again in a couple of units here, Unit 7 and the last unit. So I wanted you guys to have a background on them. So with the Columbian Exchange plus the slave trade, we get a series of routes called triangular trade. Triangular because it's between Europe, the Americas, and Africa. The Americas is kind of grouped into one, or else we'd have a rhombus trade. Doesn't sound as good. Parallelogram trade. I don't know, geometry teacher, but you get the idea. So it starts with Europe, of course. Europeans take goods from Europe, mostly manufactured goods, move them to Africa. With African leaders in West Africa, they trade their goods, their manufactured goods, for slaves. Then they take slaves to the Middle Passage, right here, MP, Middle Passage. Why? Well, because this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 2 is in the middle. Once the slaves are dropped off in the Americas, these ships take goods, mostly agricultural goods, back to Europe, and they would be sold there. Right, that's our triangular trade. So the Middle Passage is pretty infamous for lots of people being not treated like people, like cargo. And on one hand, yeah, they didn't want slaves to, lots of slaves to die, because I think, that documentary had the example of the man, the captain, throwing people off the ship. I think that wasn't necessarily common, but it's important to know that it happened. But at the same time, it's not like they valued human life. Definitely not. So 10 million enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas between 1500 and 1800. And that's not just, I know when we say America, we think about the United States, but I'm talking North America, the Caribbean, South America would all have a quote-unquote demand for slaves. All right, so I want to review a little bit before we move on. Got a lot of information down here. What was the Columbian Exchange? Hopefully you know that. I said it's really important. You'll have an assignment on just the Columbian Exchange. So it's important to know what it is, and really important to know also the effects of it. Okay, money's made, governments become wealthier, people move to the Americas, and European population increases. The Middle Passage, hopefully remember that from 45 seconds ago. remember we have a triangle trade route. That's the middle route, middle passage. All right, one thing that I forgot to talk about, but past Mr. O'Keefe reminded me, why Africa? Why not take slaves from China? Why not take slaves from Russia or the Philippines? Well, it's just, again, geography. Africa is right on the way. It's kind of right there. If I live in Holly Springs, why would I go to the Harris Teeter in Nightdale? What kind of sense does that make? I would go to the closest one. So Africa, very close to Europe. Not necessarily on the way to the Americas, but it's as close as you could get. So that's why they're African slaves. It's not because Africans were, A, B, C, or D. It's because geographically they were close. And there was a racist aspect of it, as unfortunately there is very often. Would there be white slaves? I mean, white people had white slaves before, so it's not impossible. Black people had black slaves. It's just unfortunate what's happened throughout all of history. But I think that it's hard to deny that would not play a role in this. The Boers. Oops, I should go back and let you think about that, or look back through your notes so you can remember. All right, white settlers who went to South Africa, brutalized Africans. You'll learn later that they had a segregation. They basically ruled the country and had a policy of segregation up until 1994, which is not that long ago. Triangle trade route connected Europe, the Americas, and Africa. All right, the last part here is more about the economic consequences. A lot more trading, expansion of trading. There's going to be, of course, big changes in how commerce is done. So commercial revolution. Hopefully remember a revolution. We've had the Neolithic Revolution. We've had another commercial revolution in Unit 2. So what is revolution? We always think of like the American Revolution. It's a war, but the Neolithic Revolution wasn't a war. The commercial revolution isn't a war. It's a change, a major change. So this commercial revolution is going to lead to a major change in the way things are bought and sold. And that's going to lead to two main economic systems, mercantilism and capitalism. All right, so we got the Monopoly Man for capitalism, because if you've ever played the game Monopoly, you're probably still playing it because it takes forever to finish that game. So if you've been unfortunate enough to actually play an entire game of Monopoly, I'm sorry, I'll never get that time back, but you hopefully understand the concept of capitalism, and that is to make as much money as you can, individually. So capitalism, the first part of this, capital, you think of like, oh, Raleigh is the capital, Washington, D.C. is the capital. Well, it's actually the OL, CAPITOL would be a geographic capital. This capital, we're talking about money. This is capital, money or value. So it's an economic system that we have in this country. Businesses are privately owned, and the main drive is to make a profit. If you can think of a business in the U.S. as owned by the government, then you're wrong, because there's no such thing as that. There's businesses that do business for the government, that are contracted by the government, but it doesn't mean that the government owns the business. Pure capitalism is the government has no influence at all over business, which you could see maybe be a problem. You'd have no minimum wage, you'd have no safety standards, none of that. And you'll learn when we get to the Industrial Revolution, people definitely took advantage of that because that's how capitalism was at first. So we have a little bit of an amended capitalism in this country, but for the most part, businesses are left alone. Right now, as we speak, 2020, definitely a different time. The president has basically forced some companies into making things that people need to survive, like ventilators and masks and things like that. Same thing happened in World War II, where companies that made cars, well, now you have to make tanks. knives to make airplanes because we need those really, really badly. We don't need cars as much as we need tanks to defend ourselves from the Nazis. And now we don't need whatever you're building that's not a ventilator because people are dying, so we don't have enough. But that's pretty rare. And a big part of capitalism is the stock market. Okay, we have these joint stock companies. And the reason why that is important is because it allows people to take more risks. And the more risk that you take, the more likely that something's going to be successful. So to get this down, I'm going to kind of go over real briefly how the stock market works. Although, really, you could kind of take a whole class on that. So we're going to think about what a product that we want to sell, a company that we want to start. And since no one is here to tell me, I'm going to go to the thing that really makes the most money nowadays, toilet paper. So I want to make a really nice roll of toilet paper and sell that. So I have three options. I can just use my own money to start my company, which I'm a teacher, so LOL, I don't have that yet. I could get a business loan from a bank, low interest. That's cool, but if I fail, I have to pay it back. So, kind of scary. Or I could create a joint stock company where other people or investors buy stock in my company. In other words, you pay for it. Investors pay for it and I don't. And if things go badly, I don't really lose money. That's awesome. If things go well, then I make a lot of money. That's awesome too. There's a downside though, because if there is a stockholder who has more stock than I do in the company, they actually get to run it. So if I do really well, but I don't have enough stock in my company, then I might lose my company. But I would still own stock in it, so I'd be somewhat successful. So that's kind of the idea of a joint stock company. So let's say you all listen to this, you decide to be my investors. Like, yeah, toilet paper, super lucrative. So you all buy a share for $1 because the math I like the most is very simple math. And let's say 3 of you are watching this video. Maybe that's an overestimation. Maybe not, hopefully not. So I have $3. Cool, you just gave me $1 and you got nothing for it. You got a certificate that said you own stock in my company, so good for you. Now let's say I make some banging toilet paper and people love it. My company is going to be more valuable. So whenever I start talking about it, it's valued more. Why? Because people value it more is really the best answer. It's not like a company's value. If anyone assesses the value, it's based on the stock market. So these go up based on how people think that they go up, how much they think that your company is valuable. So now your share is $100. Now you still don't make that money until you sell that stock. You're like, you know what? That's good enough. It's time for me to retire. I'm going to sell my stock to somebody else. Then you get a $99 profit back to you. That's cool. You're happy. That looks just like you. Now the other thing though is, what if you fail? What if you instead buy a $100 share of my company and then I have the worst toilet paper ever? It's just sandpaper. And you lose all that money and it's gone. That kind of stinks. Or the economy takes a downturn and all of stocks start to fall. So if my supplier who makes my toilet paper, let's say they're in China and there's a, outbreak of a disease there and they can't produce the toilet paper. Ooh, my stock's going to go down. It could be really good toilet paper, but if no one's making it, then we're in bad shape. Or someone else develops an even better roll of toilet paper. Then my stock would go down. So there's all kinds of reasons why the stock would go down. And that's why people really kind of pay attention to this, because it's kind of like making, it's kind of like a gamble, but it's an educated gamble in a way. So most likely a lot of people, your parents are probably involved with the stock market, and people want to see it go up for the most part. So hopefully you kind of understand that. That'll come in handy when you learn about World War II and the Great Depression and how that all happened. It's important to kind of have a general idea of how the stock market works. So that's capitalism, and I'm sure you'll learn more about capitalism when we get to the Industrial Revolution and the problems with capitalism. But hopefully you can kind of see the benefits too. The government can't mess with you. You can almost have pretty much fail-safes into starting a new company. It's a lot of work, but pretty low risk compared to other ways of doing it. Mercantilism, you probably have maybe not heard of mercantilism before. It's pretty much not around anymore. It's a more national kind of thing. Capitalism, individual, mercantilism, nationwide. The idea of mercantilism, the goal of it, is to make your country rich. You want gold and you want silver for your country. Capitalism is you want money for you as an individual. Okay, to do that, and this is similar with capitalism, you want to export more than you import. Remember, export, send out, like an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, you send them out of your life, or you were sent out of someone else's life. Sorry, it'll be okay. There's plenty of fish in the sea. And then imported is it's in, right? You bring it in. So it's kind of like you're buying it. This is like you're selling it. So if you're a company, you want to sell more than you buy, right? That makes sense. But the thing here is that you don't want your people really to buy goods from other countries. So as an example, farmers are simple, right? All kinds of kids' books are like on the farm. So sorry, farmers. I know a lot of farmers. They're not all simple, but the stereotype exists, so we're going to go with that. So let's say you own your home and you're a farmer. Hopefully you have better teeth. That's like the Tiger King dude. Anyway, so you want to save money. You want as much money as you can to get in your bank account. You're not going to do anything with the money. You might, but you just want as much as you can get. That's kind of the goal of mercantilism, is just have lots of money as a country. So you're kind of the farmer king here because it's a metaphor, but really we're talking French, British, European kings. You want to build everything yourself. You don't want to buy stuff from another farmer, right? If you're Farmer John, you don't buy stuff from Farmer Steve and Farmer Trevor and Farmer Audrey. You don't want to buy anything. You want to make it all yourself and then sell it so you can have lots and lots of money. Other people who live in your household, your kids, I guess. I don't know why other people would live in your house, but you do you. They can't spend their money anywhere. So your kid says, "Oh, I want a phone, Dad." I'm like, all right, we'll go out in the woods and make it. That's mercantilism. You got to figure this out for yourself. You can't go just buy it from somewhere else, because then we lose the money that we want. We want tons of money. If we're going to buy stuff from somewhere else, then we lose that money. So mercantilist countries, if you're Britain, you're not going to go buy French stuff. You're not going to go buy Spanish stuff. You're only going to buy British stuff. Hopefully you have good stuff. Anything extra that you have? Hey, if you can figure out how to build a cell phone from the woods, then make more, and you can sell those to other people. So if you could get more land, what would be an advantage of that? Well, if you had extra corn, you could sell that. More land means you can grow more corn, means you can make more money. So for mercantilists, this was great. More land, more resources, more capital that you can store and feel good about, really. So that's why there was such a push for colonization of the Americas. But what's the problem if there's other houses in the town that are like this? Well, you can't buy stuff from other people, right? If everyone's limited to only buying what their country produces, it's going to be tough to really make any money. And this is kind of why mercantilism is going to go away, and we're going to see an emergence of capitalism. What about the people in your house? Would they feel good about this? Probably not. If your parents told you to go in the woods and make a phone for yourself, you wouldn't be very happy about that. Although it's kind of hilarious, and I hope that happens to somebody someday. But you wouldn't feel good about that. You want choices, right? Not only do you want a phone, but you want the best phone, or shoes, or whatever. If they told you to make your own shoes, they probably wouldn't be very good shoes, right? You could imagine. They wouldn't look great. So you want lots of options, and I'm sure people at the time did too. But mercantilism is going to hamper that, so because they want to really help out the king and queen. So hopefully you got an idea of what mercantilism and what capitalism are all about. To summarize everything here, the most immediate effect and the biggest effect of this European age of exploration was cultural diffusion. I mean, look around. I'm speaking English because we're colonized by the English. We dress, well, we used to at least, in the European style. In America, most people who are religious are Christian. That's a European religion. I mean, we could go on and on with this. Still lasts today. It still has a legacy. Slavery, of course, still has a legacy today. The way the Native Americans were treated, of course, still has a legacy today. We're still dealing with it. We're trying to deal with it. Some better than others. But it's important to understand this so you really understand people's struggles as much as you could. Now, I started this whole unit off with a question. Did the ends justify the means? Is it okay that all this stuff happened? Because look at us today, right? We got Disney Plus. We got TikTok. Great. We got all kinds of really great things, but it really came at the expense of a lot of lives being destroyed for a long time. So is that okay? Well, that's up to you. You know the answer in your heart, in your head. But if you think, yes, it is okay, I really like my life, think about, instead of looking back at what happened, think about what the danger is looking forward. What if someone else says that? It's okay to hurt these people because it'll make things better. Well, what if you're that person? What if your mom's that person? What if your best friend's that person? Now it's different, right? Now it does affect you. And a lot of people think, well, it doesn't affect me now, it doesn't affect us now. Those are people who lived a long time ago. But the idea is still there, right? The idea that people are expendable is a dangerous thought. And that's up for you to decide. Now, if you don't have any questions going forward on the assignments that are assigned, then you can go ahead and log off and start those. If you are not sure or want to kind of get some directions because you don't want to read them, which happens, I'm going to go over them real quick. So you have two assignments, some DBQs. You do an ACE format. I'm going to go over ACE format in the next slide. There's also an ACE format guide that's going to be posted, so you can take a look at that. And then there's a Columbian Exchange chart. You're going to have a resource, and you're going to chart out the Columbian Exchange. It's going to be a little bit of reading, a little bit of comprehension, a lot of critical thinking. Do some of that. So for ACE responses, each question is going to have 3 sentences to answer it. Okay, the A sentence is going to just be the answer. You restate the question, in your answer the question. Pretty simple. 2, set the evidence from the reading. You're going to literally copy, word for word, because you're going to use quotation marks, the part of the reading that told you the answer. And I know in my class we've done this before. We've highlighted or underlined where you found the answer. You're just going to write it down. In the E-sense, you're basically just telling me how you knew the answer from the reading. And this is very much like a math equation, right? If we do 1 plus x equals 2, we know that x is 3. Just kidding, I'm not that bad. X is 1. All right, let's check it. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Is that right? Counting with my thumb and finger. Yeah, that is right. It's the same kind of thing here with the E-sense. The E-sense is this step. So here's the document. When the dog saw his owner, he wagged his tail. That's it. Question, how did the dog feel when he saw his owner? Now, it takes a little bit of knowledge. Most people know. So the A sentence here, when the dog saw his owner, I restated the question, right? He was happy. That's the answer. Okay, well, how do you know that he was happy? It doesn't say he was happy. Well, he, quote, wagged his tail. Okay, but how do you know that he was happy? This is it. The E sentence, dogs wag their tail when they're happy. Pretty simple. Helps you think about it, helps you kind of check your work so you know that you're right. This is really important because you get a lot of exams. The final exam, if we were to take one, would have lots of document-based questions, and those are hard for some people. This is a way for you to kind of check your answers, at least think about them more than once. So that's why I think this is really important for us to do. But that's it. That's my notes. Hopefully you enjoyed a break from sleeping and video games and eating lots of food and being bored. Hopefully learn something. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to contact your teachers. Stay safe out there, guys.